Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. In Afghanistan, Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid says the war has ended with the takeover of the Panch Valley. Addressing a press conference in Kabul, Mujahid reiterated promise of an inclusive Afghan government. He added that the resistance front gave negative answers when the Taliban tried to negotiate. Meanwhile, the National Resistance Front said their fight against the Taliban will continue until freedom prevails. Pakistani nation is celebrating Defence and Martyrs Day today to pay tribute to the heroes of the 1965 war with India. It was a momentous day in Pakistan's history when its armed forces thwarted Indian offensive. In their messages, President Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan have renewed Pakistan's pledge of never compromising on its sovereignty and its principled stand on Kashmir. Uneasy calm has returned to the streets of Guinea's capital, Conakry, a day after the military ousted President Alpha Condé and dissolved the government. The move drew international condemnation and sparked calls for the release of Condé. Hard-hit Mexico and Brazil have seen a drop in coronavirus numbers as both logged less than 300 daily deaths. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered 57 new fatalities and over 3,600 infections in the last 24 hours. Globally, the COVID-19 death toll has reached over 4.56 million, while the caseload is more than 220 million. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid says the Afghan war has officially ended with the takeover of the Panjshir. Addressing a press conference in Kabul, Mujahid reiterated the promise of an inclusive Afghan government.
The Taliban spokesperson said they assured Pakistan that the Afghan soil will not be used against any country. Mujahid said regional countries including Pakistan, Iran, China and Russia would be invited to the interim government ceremony in Kabul. He called on former members of the Afghan forces to integrate with the new rulers. On Panjshir, Zabihullah Mujahid said National Resistance Front gave negative answers when the Taliban tried to negotiate. Meanwhile, the National Resistance Front said their fight against the Taliban will continue until freedom prevails. Earlier, the front said its spokesperson Fahim Dashti, a commander, General Abdul Wadud Zara, were killed in the conflict. Meanwhile, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has departed for Qatar and Germany to thank them for helping in evacuations. It overlaps with Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's wider Gulf visit covering Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain and Kuwait. Reportedly, about 1,000 people, including Americans, are awaiting US State Department's clearance of their charter flights.
For more on this, we have with us Sumaira Khan, our bureau chief from Islamabad. Now, Sumaira, the Taliban have claimed to capture the Panch Valley. However, the National Resistance Front announced to continue fighting. What is the ground situation there?
Thank you very much. The kind of news I'm receiving from Panjshir right now, specifically from our sources from Bazarak and a couple of people, a couple of personalities from the resistance forces as well, those who are in contact with us off and on, and they are of the view that yes, there is seemingly quite a control that has been taken over by the Taliban in Panjshir Valley, and it will be for the first time that Northern Alliance control has vanished from the valley, and there will be a proper governance and law and order by the Afghan government and under the rule of Talib forces. So it will be after 43 years that Northern Alliance is out of Panjshir Valley. So Zabiullah Mujahid, the spokesperson of Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, he just announced in a press conference just a while ago in Kabul, and he spoke to people and he gave assurances once again. But we are hearing from the resistance forces as well that they are going to keep fighting, because still we are unable to get the exact hideouts. I guess I've heard about Amrullah Saleh, that Amrullah Saleh has fled to Tajikistan, and we are trying to confirm those news as well. And the fate of Fahad Masood, that is yet to be it is yet to be decided. Since they are going to depute the governor and the deputy governor of the province from the Panjshir Valley, and Zabi has just told the reporters that both the personalities and the legitimate government officers, they are going to be dealt by the Panjshiris, not by the people from any other province, just to keep calm and peace in the valley. So the people are they're more confident about the governance in the valley. So right now, the kind of measures they are taking, they are just taking those measures to keep the confidence of masses of the valley. I'm sorry, I'm on a airbase right now, so you might be listening to those shootings as well. So this is the scenario right now in Panjshir Valley, and I think this is going to be the Talib victory in the Panjshir Valley after 43 years in Afghanistan, and we can say that there is a legitimate rule on the entire Afghanistan right now under the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan.
Samara Khan, thank you for updating us. And now we're moving on. Pakistan is celebrating Defense and Martyrs Day today to pay tribute to the heroes of the 1965 war with India. It was a momentous day in Pakistan's history when its armed forces thwarted the Indian offensive.
This year's theme is Our Martyrs, Our Pride. Salute to all the relatives belonging to the Ghazis and the Shaheeds. The day began with the 31-gun salute in Islamabad and a 21-gun salute in the provincial capitals. Later, a change of guard ceremony was also held at Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's mausoleum in Karachi. General Officer Commanding Major General Raza Azad laid a wreath at Major Shabir Sharif's Shaheed's grave in Lahore. In their messages, President Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan renewed Pakistan's pledge of never compromising on its sovereignty and its principled stand on Kashmir. On the occasion, Khan vowed to keep on exposing the real face of a radicalized India to the world.
As Pakistan celebrates the 56th Defence Day, Colonel retired Zafar Chima reminisces his time in training during the 1965 war with Indus News. More in this report by our correspondent Manahil Ahmed.
The 6th of September represents Pakistan's valiant armed forces who rebuffed the Indian attack with full vigor. Colonel retired Zafar Chima was in the Pakistan Military Academy when the Indian forces launched an attack without a declaration of war. He said during the war, the duration of his training increased to 15 hours per day in Kakul.
The remaining period of the training in the PMA, we just underwent the military training, the drills, and the tactical studies and all. And our duration of sea training was increased from 12 hours to 15 hours.
After completing his training, he was commissioned to his unit in the Sialkot Center where the biggest tank battle was fought. He said despite the ceasefire, the Indians tried to capture more area.
Ceasefire had taken place, but still the enemy was still deployed and we were facing each other face to face. So during my stay at the border, during the ceasefire, our unit officers used to do a lot of patrolling, and we were safeguarding the border sea which was assigned to us, and it was in the Charwa sector. During this period, in my unit, Indians tried a couple of times to capture more area. So we also attacked them and dislodged them.
Chima said the morale and purpose of Pakistani forces were high enough to attain victory despite being outnumbered by the enemy. Manahil Ahmed, Indus News, Islamabad.
The Indo-Pakistan War of 1965 saw the second largest tank battle of history since the Second World War. Pakistan won the Battle of Chawinda by destroying hundreds of enemy tanks and naming the battlefield the graveyard of Indian tanks. More about the historic encounter in this report.
On 7th September 1965, the Indian side, comprising the 1st Armoured Division, 6th Mountain Division and 2 other divisions, took control of the Sialkot border. At least 230 tanks that consisted of both the Centurions and Shermans were part of its forces. They planned to capture the Grand Trunk Road with an intent to completely cut off the Pakistani supply line across Wazirabad. However, Pakistan Army immediately responded with the 7th Infantry Division and the 6th Armoured Division in Chawinda. Majority of its tanks came from the 25th Cavalry, which was commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Nisar Ahmed. At this point in the battle, the Indian side outnumbered the Pakistanis by 10-1. Yet, for the next several days, Pakistani soldiers fought valiantly, successfully stalling the Indian advance despite being outgunned. Meanwhile, the country's air force also aided its ground troops by decimating several Indian tank columns and infantry brigades. The courage and strategic brilliance of Pakistani forces resulted in the retreat of India's 1st Armoured Division, subsequently seizing all its offensives. The Indians were soon forced to run away, leaving behind their tanks and bodies of hundreds of their fallen compatriots. Meanwhile, the Indian armoured line was completely decimated with the loss of at least 180 tanks, thereby naming Chawinda as the graveyard of Indian tanks.
Now with us, Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodi, defence analyst from Islamabad. Thank you for your time. Mr. Lodi, why do you think India chose the path of aggression in 1965?
Thank you very much. I was just a student of class 6 and, a 13-year young boy. But the memories are so vivid and so clear. The way the entire nation, got gelled up and they stood before the aggression like a wall made of steel. Why did India, opted for this aggression is very well understood. It is a part of the history. Actually, it all started once, there was some little uprising in Kashmir because of some event. And because in those times it used to be ceasefire line and not, line of control. So it was not sacrosanct. So some of our, soldiers, they went to help the Kashmiris across in Kashmir. But, it didn't really succeed much because, so in retaliation, India attacked Azad Kashmir. That was a big attack. So our operation was Operation Gibraltar, where we had sent few people inside, Kashmir. They came with a proper attack on Kashmir. So we had to do something for it. So we went for Operation Grand Slam, which was again in Kashmir. So these things were happening within Kashmir. But once India saw that they will not be able to contain the this battle and this war within Kashmir, and they were losing it, so they decided to cross international border. Actually, the war starts once you cross international border. That was 6th of September, night 5th September. So many of our youth, they don't understand. They say that we had started the war. My dears, that was a ceasefire line. It was not sacrosanct. Small attacks used to happen this way and that way. But this time, because they started losing once our forces were moving towards Cham Jodiya and towards Akhnur, which was all part of Kashmir. And that was a legitimate, you can say, battles. But then they started this crossing the ceasefire line. And they had made a very grand plan. And that grand plan was to capture Lahore, to capture Sialkot, and then go up to the junction of Wazirabad so that they can cut the railway line, they could cut the GT road. But all that in vain we can talk later on. But you asked that why did they attack? This was the reason which I have just narrated to you.
Right, Mr. Lodi, how did Pakistan manage to defeat an army many times bigger and better equipped at that time?
Right, this is a question I think which must be analyzed, which must be discussed, and especially our youngsters, the people of today, they must know that it has never been, if you look, because I am a student of military history, it has never been that the preponderance of materials, they have, ensured success in wars and battles. Of course, it is important. Nobody should deny that. Technology is important, materials are important, numbers are important. But the actual thing is, just by giving uniforms and by providing arms, you can't make an army. And you've just seen what has happened in the neighborhood. So actually, it is the purpose behind your war or your battle. It is the objective which is in front of you, and above all, the spirit and the morale, which actually is the driving force. For such whenever you go to war and you face the enemy, and especially in case of Muslims, their concept of shahadat and the concept of jihad is so potent that it can really overcome many times bigger enemies and many times stronger in terms of material. So they had 3-4 times larger, 3 times at least larger army. They had 3-4 times larger air force and also double or triple the navy. But later on, if you ask a question, I will tell you what actually happened. So it was this spirit and spirit of jihad, spirit of martyrdom, which could not have stopped any by any army, however strong it could have been. So if you ask me that how did we manage this? So these are the things that by the grace of Allah, our army and our people of Pakistan still possess this spirit. So our enemies must know that what they are against.
All right, Mr. Lodi, what is the reason behind India's jingoistic mindset? Do you believe it is getting worse?
Yes, I think it is more because of fear. Because if you see that, Sayyid Gilani Sahab died 2 days earlier. So it was a normal death, natural death of a 92, 93 years old man. Of course, he was a great leader. He had jailed all the Kashmiris under his leadership. But their fear was so big and, so deep-rooted, they didn't even allow the family to arrange for his, burial the way it should have been, because he was a great leader. But in spite of all their efforts, his body was still wrapped in Pakistani flag and, then buried. So this shows that they have some apprehension, and they have some fear in their mind and in their heart. And that is why I always say that they will not be able to sustain this onslaught of freedom fighters, the freedom struggle. It is just a matter of time. And now that once they also get inspired, whatever has happened elsewhere, I think it is just a matter of time. Very soon, Kashmir will get its freedom and they will join Pakistan, inshallah. We just have to count few years, a few months, nothing more than that.
Mr. Lodi, Indian news pundits say Pakistan's armed forces cannot hold India off after 24 hours of conventional war. Is there any truth to that?
No. I mean, if you look at the history, okay, we are talking about 65 war. I told you what they wanted to do. They wanted to capture Lahore. They wanted to capture Sialkot and go up to, and they could not actually cross BRB, canal, which is the front line canal, just close to the border. They came, into some areas of Sialkot, but then they were pushed back. So, and they were 3-4 times larger than what happened to them once, February 19, when, our Air Force, they showed them the real grit of our Air Force. And whatever has happened elsewhere, how the Muslims fight, what is the spirit behind whenever a Muslim fight a Muslim army, or whenever they come across any challenge. So they should have learned their lessons, and saying such things that we cannot, if they are so confident, what are they waiting for? I mean, according to them, we are creating a lot of trouble for them, and according to them, of course, it is not true. So why are they waiting? Why don't they come and finish this thing in 24 hours? I'm one of those who's waiting, who's praying that they should do a mischief, and then let them see what comes in response. They will lose everything. Not only Kashmir, occupied Kashmir, I think they will lose large parts of India if they ever try to do anything of this sort.
Right. Lieutenant General retired named Khalid Lodi, thank you for speaking to Indus News. And now we're moving on. Earlier defense analyst Fahad Masood was our guest in studio with Munib Hamid.
Now, for more on this, we have in studio with us Fahad Masood, international security analyst with extensive aviation experience, and we are going to ask him to take us back to 1965, first of all, 6th of September, just to reprise our audience what really happened with India on that day.
Well, it's a 2-week-long affair that started off on the 1st and finished later on, but 6th and 7th become the crucial dates where the air war had, or the Pakistan Air Force had complete air superiority within the eastern border, and with India specifically. So that is where Alam, Rafiqi, Yunus and Cecil and Middle Court and everybody who was there at that point in time were engaged directly with the enemy aircraft, may it be in an air-to-air or an air-to-ground battle. So we did our bit during that time, and obviously we had our victories that came across with Alam in the event of those 5 aircraft that were shot down over Sargodha. So it's a affair of 2 weeks as we speak.
Right, Fahad, you have been in the cockpit. Also share that experience and what it is to sit there and hit the Indian jets and to send them back. And also, do we still have heroes like, as you mentioned, Rafiqi, I beg your pardon, Cecil and Yunus in the Pakistan Air Force right now?
Well, with my own experience, I have some amount of military fighter flying experience since 99, but what I would like to take back is, once again, as an analyst on this whole situation, that the time once this thing was taking place, if we look into the context of things, we were in a domain of both CETO, CENTO, and a lot of other things going across globally. We were within the American bloc at that time. We were willing to go against the Soviet bloc. So that being that, the Air Force at specific of the dates that I've mentioned, 6th and 7th, we were in a state of what the Noor Khan, who was at that time Chief of the Air Staff, referred to as preemption. That was the doctrine that we followed. So looking at that specific timeline, the whole situation was very dynamic. We had determined that the targets that needed to be engaged across the eastern border were practiced, planned and executed well. The experience, if considering that specific time, we have, what do we say, the adrenaline was on the higher side. It was rushing. We were looking for the enemy in the air and on the ground both. So if we look at the complete situation, the scenario, we look at heroes who came across in different timelines within these 2 weeks. And if we look at the present time, it's not too far back, 27th Feb 2019, where we did exactly what we were supposed to do as an Air Force to defend the aerial frontiers of the state. We still have heroes, heroes by the name of, if we go back to, once again, the same timeline, Hassan Siddiqui, he's infamous right now, Wing Commander Noman Ali Khan, same thing. On the other side, we have a lot of Asifs, a lot of Bilals, a lot of other people who are doing well within the complete affair of things. So a lot is happening as we speak.
Right, Fahad, if we watch the history, it is completely understood. India misunderstood and miscalculated the Pakistani response. Now, what lessons were learned from that encounter?
Well, we have, as we call, gone through the stages, starting from where we were at the ab initio stages from 47 till date. We have gradually improved within our tactics, strategy, doctrine, as well as the application of it. Lessons learned from 65 that we had to be ready for an enemy who is greater in number. We have to be excellent at what we do because quality was something that we could work on. Quantity was never on our side. Outgunned 1:5 during 65 was a big number. But rest assured, we really put our heads down and came up with this concept of energy maneuverability. We picked it up from the Americans and evolved it into what we now called as dogfighting. So we did well where we were in 65, but we haven't stopped since then. 27th Feb, as I mentioned, it's a clear example of a continuous evolution at all three fronts, starting from tactical operations to strategy.
Right, Fahad, also tell us, how does the air war affect the outcome of the conflict?
Oh, well, present time frame, everything that is done on ground requires air superiority. You look at the events of 65, same thing. If you go on the international front, go to the Iraq War of 91, without the air superiority available, it wasn't possible that they could fight with relative independence. So the people on ground, the armies on ground as well as on the sea require a good amount of ability to maneuver. So the Air Force in specific in 65 enabled the military forces on ground to have relative freedom of movement. So that is how it is. But we have to continue to evolve, and the doctrines keep changing from of preemption of 65 to ever readiness of 2019, 27th Feb. So we have to be there every time.
Now, talking about the doctrines now, doctrinal implications in contemporary times in regional air war possibilities.
Well, if you look at the onset of aviation or military aviation, we had people like Billy Mitchell, Hugh Trenchard, who came up with the ideas of the bombers will always get through. But the fighter fleet started to grow in gradually, and then came John Warden's five-ring theory that really played a pivotal role in the Gulf War of the Gulf War of 91, pardon me. 65, Noor Khan, one-word doctrine of preemption was what enabled us to do what we did. But where we stand today, contemporarily, there is this very important doctrine of SPOT. SPOT stands for Strategic, Persuasive, Oriented Targeting, where you hit the enemy where it hurts. This specifically goes for a relatively smaller air force in quantum and quantity, but excellence as we speak is one of the hallmarks of the Pakistan Air Force. So we continue to evolve, and this doctrinal implication or improvement is where it starts from the grand strategic to operational to tactical scale as well.
Right. Now, Fahad, lastly, if there's a message you want to send out to Pakistan's enemies, internal and external, obviously, with respect to 6th of September.
Well, first and foremost, we are ready, we are waiting. If you want to test us, you've done it before, call it 65, call it 2019, 27th Feb. We are in the air, no matter where you come from, you call it the eastern or the western front. We are ready, we are able, and we are waiting.
Right, Fahad Masood, international security analyst with extensive aviation experience. Thank you very much for coming here.
Pleasure being here.
And talking to us about 6th of September and the role of Pakistan Air Force. And as he said, the Pakistan Armed Forces are ready and they are waiting and they can take you down. This is all.
Uneasy calm has returned to the streets of Guinea's capital, Conakry, a day after the military ousted President Alpha Condé and dissolved the government. The move drew international condemnation and sparked calls for the release of Condé. Earlier in the day, the army summoned Condé's ministers to a meeting, adding that failure to attend would be considered a rebellion. The takeover in the West African nation that holds the world's largest bauxite reserves, used to produce aluminium, sent prices of the metal to a 10-year high. There was no indication of any supply disruption yet. Hamas has called for stepping up protest against Israeli settler incursions in occupied East Jerusalem. This comes as Israeli right-wing groups ask settlers to force their way into Al-Aqsa Mosque to mark Jewish holidays. In a statement, the Hamas spokesperson said the intrusions are guarded by the occupation army and police. The spokesperson said Palestinians must escalate activities in a bid to reject these aggressions. Earlier, Egyptian President Fattah al-Sisi held a phone call with his Israeli counterpart. In a statement, the Egyptian presidency said both discussed the revival of peace talks between Palestinians and Israelis. Qatar says it will soon resume funding for civil servants and poor families in the Gaza Strip under a new mechanism. The Gulf State aide Envoy Mohammed Al-Emadi Qatari said the aid will resume in a few days after meeting with Hamas officials. He said the group has endorsed a new payment mechanism involving the rival Palestinian Authority as well as the UN. Emadi said the new agreement also entails full opening of border crossings with Gaza. Gas-rich Qatar used to provide $30 million per month to help operate the enclave's lone power plant and support needy families. The international community has condemned the Houthi missile attack on Saudi Arabia that struck eastern province, injuring 2 children. In a statement, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said these attacks threaten residents' lives, including over 70,000 U.S. citizens. He called on Houthis to agree to a ceasefire and to stop cross-border attacks. UK's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said Houthis' reckless behavior threatens innocent civilians and obstructs regional stability. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the Gulf Cooperation Organization also slammed Houthis for the attack. Yesterday, Saudi Arabia said it intercepted a ballistic missile and armed drones fired at its oil-rich eastern region by Yemen's Houthi. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Hard-hit Mexico and Brazil have seen a drop in coronavirus numbers as both logged less than 300 daily deaths. Globally, the COVID death toll has exceeded 4.56 million, while the caseload is over 220 million. Details in the following report.
Despite over 5 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses administered globally, many countries continue to face steep increases in infections and deaths. The World Health Organization chief says almost 75% of these doses have been administered in just 10 countries. Tedros Adhanom says the largest producer of vaccines, G20, holds the key to achieving vaccine equity and ending the pandemic. He made these remarks at the G20 Health Ministers Conference in Italy. Italian Health Minister Roberto Speranza reiterated Adhanom's words.
Oggi ci sono diseguaglianze molto.
Today, there are very strong inequalities between the richest and the most advanced countries, which now have very significant vaccination rates and continue to progress. And then there are countries that have fallen behind. The commitment of the Pact of Rome, on which we are working, is to create the conditions for vaccines to be a right for all and not a privilege for the few.
In Amsterdam, thousands of people staged a protest around Dam Square against the coronavirus restrictions. In the U.S. state of Texas, over 14,000 people are hospitalized, just below a record set in January as a winter wave wreaked havoc across America. States' rural health facilities are being forced to keep patients they are not equipped to care for. Over in the south, after months of stalled attempts to obtain the vaccines through COVAX, Venezuela is finally set to receive the first batch.
las primeras vacunas del mecanismo.
This week, the first vaccines from the COVAX mechanism will arrive. We hope the COVAX mechanism will accelerate so that in October, we'll receive all the vaccines to vaccinate an estimated 6 million of Venezuelans with the COVAX mechanism.
In Vietnam, the health ministry says Ho Chi Minh City and capital Hanoi must vaccinate all of their adult residents with at least one shot by September 15th. Meanwhile, New Zealand has announced to ease COVID-19 curves in all regions outside Auckland from midnight on Tuesday.
In Pakistan, 57 more people have died of COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the nationwide tally of deaths has climbed to 26,232. It said the positivity rate fell to 6.32%, with 3,613 new infections reported overnight. Health officials say over 92,000 cases are active, of which about 6,500 are critical. Pakistan has registered over 1.18 million coronavirus cases so far. Meanwhile, more than 1,064,000 people have recovered. The ministry says the country has administered 61.7 million vaccine doses to date. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, at least 30 people have been killed in a militant attack over the weekend in the restive northeast region. Local authorities initially said 14 people had died in the attack in the Ituri area. Later, they said the civilians who went to look for the victims found 16 more bodies in the bush. Meanwhile, a civilian said the victims had mostly been attacked with machetes or shot. In the U.S., a former Marine has killed 4 people, including a 3-month-old baby in Florida. The attacker, who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, also wounded an 11-year-old girl with 7 gunshots. Police said the men had no connection with the victims and just went inside their home and opened live fire. The county sheriff said the assailant was wearing full-body armor and engaged in intense gunfight before surrendering himself. He told the police he was a survivalist and that he had been taking methamphetamine. Every year, Bolivians clear cars out their streets to celebrate Pedestrians Day. What purpose it serves in this report?
Bolivian pedestrians reclaimed the streets of their capital city as the Andean country celebrated the pedestrians and cyclists by banning all vehicles from the roads. In La Paz, the city's normally congested streets and thoroughfares were cleared of cars and turned into playgrounds for street artists, performers, and various sport activities. The event encourages people to explore alternative modes of transport.
Every year, the first Sunday of September is the Pedestrian and Cyclists in Defense of Mother Earth Day. Its fundamental purpose is to generate awareness regarding the environment.
The car-free event started 22 years ago in Cochabamba, one of Latin America's 5 most polluted cities. It has gradually taken root across the country by 2011. It had become so popular that Bolivia's legislature declared a yearly Day of Pedestrian and Cyclists in Defense of Mother Earth. The government says it wants Bolivians to reclaim physical activity in an age when young people are focused on computers.
Fundamentally, this helps us. To me, this is the most important day this country has because we, the people, take back the public space, the streets, and that generates a change. It's also a day in which we allow cars to rest and therefore we can breathe without pollution despite having the face mask.
Environment experts say the difference in air quality is noticeable. They say air pollution drops by 60% because 70% of contaminants come from vehicles.
Stocks in the Asia-Pacific have gained as investors rally to start the trading week on a positive note. Japan's Nikkei 225 is leading the gains, rising close to 2%. Shares in mainland China added over 1%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng also ascended nearly 1%. Australia's ASX 200 and Seoul's Kospi both rose marginally. For the weather updates, we have Raja Saroj Suhaib with us.
Thank you. Welcome to the weather update forecast, and we're going to start with Abu Dhabi, where weather is expected to be extremely hot with temperatures rising to 41 degrees centigrade. While in Amsterdam, partly cloudy weather is expected and temperatures steady at 22 degrees centigrade. If we head to Ankara, there is a sunny weather with temperatures at 25 degrees centigrade, and moving down under to Auckland, the temperature is chilly at 16 degrees centigrade with partly cloudy sky. Now if you're traveling to Bangkok, there will be a layer of clouds covering the sky with temperatures around 33 degrees centigrade. In Beijing, temperatures are at 23 degrees centigrade accompanied with clouds in the sky. While in Beirut, you will experience sunny weather with temperatures at 31 degrees centigrade. Meanwhile, Bernalillos will experience temperatures at 22 degrees centigrade accompanied with thin layer of clouds in the sky. Heading to Cairo, the sun will be out with temperatures at 34 degrees centigrade with clear sunny sky in the forecast. Down under in Canberra, the temperatures are at 15 degrees centigrade with sunny weather today. In Islamabad, the temperatures are at 35 degrees centigrade with clear sun in the sky. While in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at 31 degrees centigrade with thunderstorm in the forecast. That's all for now. Back to you.
Thank you, Saroj. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.